We've all been blown away by Hollywood movies and their filmmaking tricks that are just on another level. But did you know that most of these tricks are simple enough that you can use them even in your low-budget projects? That's actually how many famous filmmakers started before they made it into Hollywood. All they needed is a small passion project to put these tricks into practice and elevate their storytelling techniques to that Hollywood level. So when Panasonic offered me a chance to shoot their official GH7 promo video, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to put some of these Hollywood-inspired techniques into practice. And I highly respect Panasonic's approach. Their brief wasn't really about promoting the camera, but about giving me the motivation and funding needed to get my passion project across the finish line, provided I can stick to a tight timeline and a low budget. In this episode, I'll share 6 easy Hollywood tricks I used in my GH7 promo film, from camera hacks to lighting and editing techniques. I'll show you the original clips from the movies that inspired me, and show you how these tricks elevated my storytelling skills, solved production problems, and most of all, they made filmmaking fun. Let's dive in. Let's jump to the scene breakdown to understand how these tricks serve the narrative. So the film is about Ash, a weightlifting champion and a super talented violinist. A very rare and impressive combination of talents that I felt it deserves more than just another B-roll style fitness video. So here I try to infuse a storyline inspired by true events to add some emotional depth to her story. The film starts at a moment the barbell dramatically hit the ground. We see her disappointment as she apparently failed to lift it. It's a very familiar moment to experienced athletes as they train before their championships, which was the case here. We then cut to an edit that jumps between seeing her feeling anxious about her failure, a training montage, and her violin performance, all building up to the moment where she finally stepped up, conquered her fears, and made a successful lift attempt. The film is not really about the physical challenge in lifting weights, but more about the emotional and psychological challenges athletes face after any failed attempt during practice. I invite you to check it out. I'll leave a link below. Now let's start with one of the most famous lighting tricks, creating a fake sun. It's usually about placing a high-power light outside the window to create a direct sunlight effect. I can safely say that, with very few exceptions, all Hollywood scenes with the sun shining through the window are just fake suns. And that's exactly what I did in the violin scene. I placed the fake sun in the background, flaring it to the lens with a warmer color wash, just to give it a more dreamy look. I wanted to establish a stark contrast with the gym sequence that has a higher contrast, more dramatic underground mood, with barely any visible or practical light sources. The violin sequence was like a metaphorical glimpse into her emotional state at different stages of her journey. So this sun is nothing but a Nanlite 150B with a Fresnel lens attached to it. It was not even placed outside the window. It was very much inside, barely 20 feet away from the talent. The advantages of having a fake sun are pretty obvious. First, you can decide on its exact position and be able to frame your shot accordingly. The window was actually facing west, but the real sun's path was moving above the window, and there's nothing you can do about it. Also, with a fake sun, you don't have a time limit. I planned 2 hours for this scene, while in reality, even if the sun was following the perfect path, it would have barely lasted 30 minutes in that part of the window. Another advantage of fake suns is they can be created anytime, provided the sky is already lit by the real sun. So you can plan your fake sunset anytime you see fit, regardless of what time the real sun will set, and that's what we did. We shot the scene 3 hours before the real sunset, giving me more than enough time to get all I need without stressing out if it starts getting dark. So having full control over the sun by controlling a single point light source is much easier and cheaper than planning around the real sun that could even end up hiding behind the clouds. Moving on to the next camera trick, shutter drag. Remember this training sequence from The Matrix. The camera is relatively steady, yet you still feel like they're breaking Bruce Lee's speed record. If you pay close attention, there's this extra motion blur you see in their movements. That's achieved through a super simple camera trick that's called shutter drag. All you need is just push your shutter angle beyond 180 degrees. The further you go, the more motion blur you get. Almost all video-centric cameras have this function, but for cameras that don't, just get your shutter speed as close as possible to your frame rate, but don't go lower. And that's what I did in this shot from the training sequence. You can see the exaggerated amount of motion blur when I freeze frame. So here, I cranked the shutter angle on my GH7 all the way up to 357 degrees. Then shot the first clip in medium wide, with a subtle slider movement to the left, just to add some parallax and depth to the frame. Then cut to a higher angle in medium close, and added some extra camera shake just to push the effect of motion blur even further, which will add this extra boost of energy to the shot. So don't limit yourself to the 180-degree shutter angle rule. Hollywood filmmakers never really stick to it as religiously as you might think. Explore cranking it higher to get some extra motion blur in your action or sports scenes to make them look even more dynamic. Another interesting observation from that Matrix scene, they wanted to push that shutter drag effect further to establish Neo's speed going beyond the human threshold. So they introduced this echoing or strobing hand effect, which I have a feeling was inspired by Bruce Lee's Fist of Fury magic hands fight scene. If you're already enjoying learning about these tricks, then I'm sure you'll enjoy learning more from today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an incredible educational source to help you further enhance your skills or learn new ones. Skillshare is a massive learning community for creatives with thousands of classes across various categories that can help you expand your skills as a filmmaker, like cinematography, color grading, editing, and so much more beyond just filmmaking. Skillshare classes are taught by passionate creatives just like you who are eager to share their tools, techniques, and professional journeys with everyone. One unique feature of Skillshare is their learning paths. They're curated sequential class collections to help you master a specific skill. And during summertime, we all get some downtime from work. And that's a great chance to invest in yourself and learn new skills. Like the business side of being a freelancer, even the most talented filmmakers need basic business skills to grow. And Skillshare has a whole section dedicated to helping you with that. I already started checking these classes, and even with my experience in the business, listening to others' experiences and advice already gave me some valuable information I can implement in my career. Whether you want to learn more about filmmaking or looking to discover new skills, Skillshare is a great place to start. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Let's jump back to the third trick, the match cut. Match cuts are one of Hollywood's most favorite editing tricks that we've seen in so many movies over the years. They're all about building some sort of continuity between shots by matching the action, composition, or even sound. There are so many reasons famous filmmakers use them in their movies, but the three main ones are: first, they build connections by linking ideas, characters, or places across different parts of the story. You can also use them as a subtle way to hide messages and add symbolism or metaphors to your story. And finally, they offer a seamless flow between shots and guide the viewer's attention to specific parts of the frame without a sudden jump. The most iconic match cut is from Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, where we see the apes throwing the bone in the air, then cut to a spaceship in outer space. Kubrick matched not only the frame composition, but the action or direction of both objects moving down the frame. That wasn't just to create a cool transition, of course, but to tell the backstory that will set the tone of the whole movie. He used this match cut to draw connection between the bone and the spaceship, basically saying, "Look how far we've come from a bone to a spaceship," suggesting the dominance of our species through using these advanced tools separated by thousands of years of human evolution that transformed the primitive into modern. So this match cut literally compressed millennia into a fraction of a second, which makes it a temporal match cut. More on that later. Inspired by Kubrick's match cut between different tools, I created this more humble version. First we see her playing the violin holding a bow, then transition to her holding a barbell almost at the same position and angle as the bow. So the match cut in handling both the bow and the barbell built the connection between both scenes and both her skills, implying how just as she mastered the skill of playing the violin, this is the moment in the training where she also reached the same mastery level and skill in weightlifting. You can also use double match cuts to connect three scenes, like this one from Scott Pilgrim, starting with him staring at this girl as she skates out of the door, then cut back to his rehearsal when his friend snaps him out of his daydreaming. Then once again where the same friend answered his question in the following scene. Jumping back to my simpler version of the double match cut sequence.
Each note can break me, but I'm willing to break.
I matched both to action and composition to create this visual continuity between these three different moments. First, she's feeling anxious, scared of failing again. We hear her thoughts saying, "Each note can break me." And as she looks down, we have a graphic match to action as we see her playing the violin, where she paces herself to find her focus, then following her body movement again as she moves up, another graphic match to action, and she's now in the gym holding the handles of the cycling machine instead of the violin. Now she seems more determined to overcome these negative feelings, which is pretty clear because we just heard her say, "But I'm willing to break." Let's play it again.
Each note can break me, but I'm willing to break.
Let's jump back to temporal match cuts. We already established how they compress time to support the narrative on a massive plot level, or even on smaller scene levels, like when we saw Scott staring at the girl walking out the door, then cut back to his rehearsal with his friends. Besides being a pretty cool visual transition, it also suggested the long amount of time his mind was busy thinking about this girl, basically from the moment he saw her walk out the door all the way to his rehearsal with his friends. Using such a match cut to establish the passing of a long amount of time is what I try to establish here in this scene.
Should I try again? And fail again?
While the composition between both shots might not be perfectly matching, but the action of looking and its direction are all I needed for this kind of match cut. The match cut suggests that what kept her mind busy and concerned all this time between her warm-up at the warehouse and her exercise at the gym was that weight she's staring at in the second shot. And this could be a long time, since both scenes are happening in different locations and she's wearing different clothes in each of them. It might even be different days. Again, match cutting is such a huge topic to cover that I'm not really giving it justice here, but the point of this episode is not to deep dive into it, but just to give you some ideas on how to get inspired by these famous Hollywood match cuts and find creative ways to implement them in your low-budget film. Now let's explore some framing tricks, another massive subject I'll try to simplify. We all know that using creative and super dynamic B-roll style angles can add an engaging and energetic feel to your film. But when you have a story arc in your script, these camera tricks become a lot more than just creative angles and movements that look cool. They should also help tell your story, and that's by answering the two important questions, where and why. Where is not about the physical location, but where your shot fits within the story. It's the context, or the big picture. So your choice of framing should follow through on what came before it, and potentially pave the way for what's gonna happen after. Why is about the reason behind your choice of angles or camera movement on a shot level, aka your shot motivation. Do you want to portray your character as powerful with a low-angle shot that will make them look much bigger and stronger? Or evoke a feeling of isolation with a slow dolly out to make the character look like they're being abandoned and left behind? Or establish a relationship or connection between a person and an object simply by using an over-the-shoulder framing that's usually reserved for dialogue between two people? And that's what I did here. I used this over-the-shoulder framing to build this connection between her and the weight. Here's the full scene to better understand the context.
Should I try again? And fail again?
So after being defeated, she's not looking at it as a dead weight, but as her nemesis that made her fail once and could easily make her fail again. The context, mixed with the over-the-shoulder framing, established the weight as another evil character she's scared of. It's watching and taunting her, sitting there as a reminder of her defeat. Also, after she says,
and fail again?
We cut to a violent scene shot in a Dutch angle. This tilt visually supports the feeling of her emotional imbalance at this moment, caused by her uncertainty and concern about another potential failure. Another couple of subtle tricks I used in this shot. First, we see her fall back and out of focus as I did a subtle dolly out. I also synced it with a specific part of the music where you hear two notes that harmonize to give you this eerie feeling of falling. Have a listen. It's like a Doppler effect, as if she's falling deeper into that dark thought of another failure. Then she suddenly breaks herself out of it to take back control and resume her training in this other shot. It's all these small details that add up to slowly build this moment. Another Hollywood classic I used is the high-angle, low-angle combo. Generally, a high-angle shot makes someone look small, vulnerable, or weak, while the reverse low-angle shot does the opposite. It makes them look huge, strong, and powerful. This isn't set in stone. Context can completely reshape how you interpret these angles. Each director can put their own spin on this combo to convey different messages. Sometimes the same director uses this combo differently based on the context. Like in Rocky III, it was a show game, so the angle was more exaggerated, borderline comical. While in Rocky IV, it was a life and death situation, so it looked more serious. Inspired by this, here's my version of this combo.
And no matter how much load I bear on my shoulders.
It starts with a high angle, then cut to the reverse low angle. For context, this comes right after the intense training montage. It's that rise to the challenge moment when she's finally ready to face her heavyweight nemesis. Now check how this shot contrasts with her initial low point. Remember when she was sitting there staring at the weight, feeling all doubtful in the aftermath of her first defeat? But now, she's standing tall and towering above this heavy weight in a strong stance. But there's another trick hidden in this framing. See how this shot has a strong tilt to the left? It made the weight drop to the lower side of the frame to give you this feeling that it's so heavy it's tipping the whole frame out of balance. So the composition got your eyes doing the heavy lifting and made you feel the weight just by how it's framed. Then comes the reverse to a low angle. In this context, it makes her look strong and powerful. What's interesting is how this is the exact same pose from when she first got defeated, but the difference in context motivated different framing. She looked vulnerable, motivating the camera to make her look smaller in the frame. So I shot it from a distance, straight angle with a slight tilt up on a short tele lens. Fast forward through her workout montage, she's much stronger now and ready to take on the challenge, motivating the camera to make her look bigger and more powerful. So I got much closer, shot from a low angle with a strong tilt-up, and used the wider lens to leverage the distortion it creates, making her larger than in real life. I actually used this same trick later in the sequence. So in this frame, the camera motivation was also to make the weight look super daunting, bigger and heavier than it really is. So I used the same trick: get close, low angle, wide lens. Next trick is about creating turning points and making them impactful. If you're not familiar, turning points are key moments in your film that significantly change your story's direction. Every time you hit a turning point, this story gains momentum to push it through a different and new path. And because they have such powerful narrative impact, they should also have visuals that are equally impactful and memorable. Some filmmakers push the boundaries of cameras and VFX to create iconic moments like this, or keep it super simple yet effective with more focus on the emotional impact of the moment, or mix both visual and emotional to maximize the intensity of this turning point. The common thread here is how they all visually stood out from every other scene in their films, or even in all filmmaking history. Take the Shawshank Redemption's prison escape scene. It was so iconic that it became the movie poster. So what made it so special? There was a massive visual shift in the scene that separated it from the whole movie. Even though the turn of events clearly indicated it's a turning point, the director still decided to make it even bigger visually through many camera, art direction, and lighting tricks. The film settles back to the usual look right after that, but of course the story took a completely different turn. Inspired by this, I thought of another simple trick. Let's see if you can spot it. Here's a snapshot of my film. It's a collection of high and low angles with slanted perspective lines, and nothing is symmetrical. All except for 3 shots. Can you spot them? These are the only shots with a straight angle or box perspective in the whole film. These two have perfectly symmetrical composition, and these ones have clear horizontal lines that stand out from all other slanted lines out there. So this balanced composition is to symbolize the balance that was restored back to her. She's now focused and determined to win this. Let's break them down so I can show you some extra tricks I added in each of them. The first major turning point is when she's finally back in the game, ready for another attempt after finding her balance. Here I synchronized it with the first kick in the music when the track shifted gears. Have a listen.
Failure is the
You can see
heaviest
how the
weight
track
I
energy
carry
went up a
every
notch. Next point is right in the middle of her successful lift. I used the symbolic climax cutaway of the weights dropping, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then finally, the only time she looks straight into the camera. It's a powerful hero moment portrayal, defiant, confident, and in full control. I used this flashing lighting effect to give it a bit of a stylistic and distinctive visual kick. My inspiration came from Euphoria, when Rue got high for the first time and the psychedelic effect of the drug was visually translated into these flashing colored lights. Of course, the context here is very different, but I felt that adapting this treatment to my film will maximize the energy levels in such a climactic moment. It was also pretty easy to shoot. I just used 2 tiny lights, set them to the opposite Kelvin settings, and asked my crew to wave them randomly at her from both sides, all while she looked straight into the camera. No fancy tricks here. Diving into the final Hollywood trick, the symbolic cutaways. Let's look at this scene from Oppenheimer. Nolan intercuts it with abstract imagery that seem visually disconnected, but in context, you can easily interpret them as atomic reactions. These are symbolic cutaways. They're like visual metaphors telling the story in more experimental ways when traditional forms of storytelling feel limiting. That's why Nolan used them as a more effective way to visualize Oppenheimer's complex mind. It's a perfect case of show don't tell when words fall short. Here's another example from Taxi Driver. As the hero watches the tablet dissolve in the water, his mind slowly drifts, motivating the camera to zoom to an extreme close-up to slowly transport us into the abstract world of his wandering thoughts. Scorsese said he borrowed this idea from another Godard's movie. You can see the strong influence when the abstract shapes of the extreme close-up of the coffee makes it look like a spinning galaxy. Inspired by this meditative close-up abstracts, I shot this scene.
Is this the end of my story? Or the beginning of another dream I chase?
As she chalks her hands, her mind begins to drift. I then cut to an extreme close-up of the chalk particles floating in the air, immersing you in this meditative moment. In context, this symbolizes the first time she looked at failure as the potential beginning of a new challenge or dream, marking the first major shift in her perspective about failure. Sound design is crucial in such moments to immerse you in this dreamy world. I blended the sounds of the chalk block with sounds of falling sand particles and crashing waves, then added some reverb and boosted the high frequencies to give it this dreamy feel.
Or the beginning of another dream I chase?
The second symbolic cutaway is when the weights dropped and the final climactic moment in the middle of her successful lift. Have a look.
Till I find my rhythm.
Again, this visual is not following any narrative thread. It's a visual metaphor to her victory against that heavy weight. She finally defeated that weight that's been taunting her all along. It feels like the weight fell and shattered into pieces, which is not the case of course, but again, it's just a metaphor. Once again, sound design helped a lot. I used the same heavy impact sound from the beginning, tweaked it a bit, and added a glass shattering sound to it to dramatize this moment even further.
Till I find my rhythm.
So try using this kind of symbolic cutaways. Push yourself beyond your comfort zone and have fun with it. There's no right or wrong here. There are so many other lessons I learned from working on this film that I want to share with you, so I'll be working on another episode to focus more on the cinematography, lighting techniques, camera settings, and color grading. Let me know in the comments which trick you like the most, and if you have any questions about any of them. Hope you like this episode. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.